Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today we are here to talk about the USA Football Ferns series that just occurred. Today we actually have the whole crew is here. So that's nice. Hello everybody.
Hi Blake.
Hey Blake.
So who wants to start? We're gonna start with the Wellington match. And so we'll take it from there.
So we all attended, just to get the hands up for each of the matches. So who attended the Wellington match?
So that was you, me, Jonathan, and Denise.
Everyone except me.
Oh,
Chill, stuck at my desk.
on
On my phone.
And who attended the Auckland match, just to wrap that up?
Yeah, the weekend game.
Three of yous. Okay. Good turnout.
Record turnout, some might say.
Not for long.
No, but well, let's hope.
Yep.
No, you beat the record the next game. So, didn't last long. Anyway, so for the Wellington match, we had a crowd of 12,508. So, pretty good turnout from Wellington. So,
Yeah, it was really good. It was, I think, probably about a good quarter of the fans would have been Americans, if not more. So I just think that was interesting. I mean, not that you go and discount those people, but there was a huge contingent of American fans across the stadium. But it just goes to show that it's not just about the home team. It's not just about the Ferns. It's about everybody who's interested in the game. So turnout was good. What did we feel about the performances on the field and the result?
Well, let's just stick on turnout for a second, because I think that was a blast. I taunted this American in front of me, and she was
American.
She was all in the get up, and that's fine. But she also said she was a Phoenix fan, and she would go watch the women's Phoenix matches. So it was like, oh, okay. So some of these Americans are also fans. They just happen to want to express their Americanism that day. And that's cool. I brought a couple Americans with me, and I brought them to the first Knicks match, and then that match. And then they were like, we should come more often. And then they started asking me about tickets and things like that. So, I mean, there is power in the numbers and the feelings and the vibe. And, watching a US match it's a fun vibe. And yeah, I'm hooray for people at matches.
On that note, I thought that there was a massive missed opportunity to announce that there was a Wellington Phoenix doubleheader on the Sunday. Towards the end of the match, the Ferns match, or just after the match had ended, they could have just gone on the PA and said, hey, do you want to come and see some of those football Ferns again? Or do you want to see more women's football? Or do you want to see more football? Just something like that, and say, come back Sunday. Come back Sunday. The Phoenix are playing, and they never did that, and I don't understand why. It does not make any sense to not do that. Everybody would benefit, but nobody did it.
I think they have a reason for that, and it's quite a logical one, because I think they wanted to make it about the Ferns and trying to get that bigger crowd. I think they don't want to overshadow the Ferns themselves by talking about the domestic team, if that makes sense. Even though a lot of the players play for the domestic team, I think they wanted just to give the Ferns their day in the sun, So I think that's to me, that would be a very valid reason as to why they didn't do that.
I mean, I think to riff off that a little bit, I know Holly was a little bit grumpy that the American players didn't sign enough autographs afterwards. Now, I got a couple cool ones, but But as a general thing, they didn't pour out onto the field and sort of take over that signature line.
And there's a reason for that. And I think that comes back to that everything that they did around that match was preparation for World Cup games. So everything they did the night before, the day of, post-match, everything they did was how are they going to be and how are they going to operate when they play a World Cup match. And I think that's a reflection of that. They may, when at the World Cup, they may spend like 5 minutes quickly doing something, but then they're going to disappear because that's how much, I think that's how much it means to them.
I think, I mean, from what I know as well, like from inside Ferns camp and things like that, that very much was the vibe that the US were like pretty strict, pushing pretty hard on pre and post match timelines. Everything was for their, like, you know, someone had a stopwatch running at every point of that tour essentially because they're just trying to have it as a massive dress rehearsal, which for me it's like, all right, but you said you were coming here to bring eyeballs to New Zealand, I think was the slightly strange American phrase. But like, you know, to me that means play the game a little bit, but equally I know how intense that this is an outfit that travels with 3 professional chefs, right? So I guess, you know, you get what you ask for. When the US
we bent over backwards for this tour. We bent over backwards for them to come and do this tour, and it was just like the least they could do. I'm not angry like that they didn't come and sign autographs for me. I'm mad for like the heaps of people who were lined up around the tunnel holding Alex Morgan, "You're my hero" signs and stuff like that, and they all just walked out. No, I just think that was a missed opportunity. Yeah, you're one of the very few, Denise, that managed to actually get any interaction, and I just think that's a massive loss, and I think that's kind of bad faith from them that they didn't take the time to do that. But
I did see Alex Morgan and Becky Sauerbrunn and Lynn Williams. Lynn Williams had a remarkable game, and we can talk about that in a bit. But Lynn Williams whipped off her shirt and gave it to a security guard, and the guy's like, "Wow, okay." He was pretty hunky. So, and then Alex Morgan did sign a bunch, and then I dropped this ball in front of Becky Sauerbrunn, and she signed it in the tunnel, and then she looked at me. She's like, "I have the ball, I'm going to throw it and you're going to catch it." And I was like, "Yes, Becky, I will do anything you want." And I'm like, "Oh, I got it."
Oh, captain, my captain.
Exactly. Now I know what it's like to be.
Yeah. But the flip side to that, the counter is that the Ferns spent about 45 to 50 minutes signing absolutely anything and everything for anyone. And that's essentially what the US tour was. In part, it was a PR exercise for the football Ferns, and they nailed it. In Wellington, the football Ferns absolutely nailed the fan interaction.
They nailed it up here too, like just before we get into the football stuff, which is where my heart lies. But like, you know, on Friday they were outside Commercial Bay, which is the business centre of Auckland, at 1 p.m. It was like 27 degrees. I stood out there in the shade by the train station talking to my mates. I just about passed out. They were out on this artificial football pitch signing everything and anything, having a kicker out with kids on school holidays for an hour, which was when their sports scientists were like, get out of the sun. Yeah. And had to drag them away, you know? So I think the Ferns are fully on board that this tour was, you know, yes, it's always good to play games. It's good to play the best in the world, but this was about a lot more than just the on the pitch stuff. And having said that, we should probably talk about the on the pitch stuff because we did play the world champions with a squad involving National League debutants, and I think that deserves a bit of unpacking.
We did pretty well.
For me, the standouts in this Wellington match, and I'll get to the Auckland match again later, but the standouts for me were Rodman and the former Mallory Pugh. Swanson? Did I get that right?
Yeah. Swanson.
Swanson, yeah. She just killed them in both matches. She's an incredible player. And I thought Rodman was too when she came on. She's very quick from what I remember. She's a very quick player.
Yeah, she's something like she was like at times like top 10 West Coast sprinter in high school and stuff, so she's genuinely extremely rapid, which I think is probably a point that I would make about, especially the Wellington game. I really noticed it. Like, we had no answer for the quickest US player, which sounds ridiculous because they're all fast, but like Emily Fox is another level of rapid. We couldn't cope with that. We couldn't cope with Swanson's pace, and she's also in the form of her life. Like, it's interesting, Denise, we were talking about that front line and where they're going to click, and how Mel Swanson now kind of disappeared into obscurity for a while after her breakout teenage stardom. And I think you saw the player that the US saw when she was 16 years old in New Zealand. Like, just to be honest, like, what I took from that game is a lot of what the US did when it clicked was undefendable. Which brings me to my player of the game, who, again, I talked about in the preview. Like, I'm obsessed with Rose Lavelle. I think she's just... I think if Rose Lavelle was a man, that people would already be having all sorts of GOAT conversations. Like, what she can do with a ball, what she can create out of thin air is just incredible. And, like, people are going to talk about the Ferns defensively, but if someone's going to backheel it through three players, perfectly weighted into the stride of a striker, Alex Morgan didn't even have to hold her run. Like, if someone's going to do that, fair play, Yeah.
There was a lot of conversation. There was a lot of conversation on socials about that exact thing, and they said that if Messi or someone did a back heel like that was so perfect, it would be on the highlight reels for months and months. That was perfection. It was like, oh, she just did that.
I feel like it blessed the turf of Sky Stadium, because, like, then the next woman just sort of woke up from whatever hibernation they've been in. But yeah, I just think that I was on the bus watching it on Sky Go, and I literally was like, did that just glitch? Like, that's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen.
You always worry when she gets the ball and she's playing against a team that you want to win. She's just incredible. But, I mean, that was part of the discussion around the match and how the US didn't win by as much as I'm assuming they thought they should. Was that the commentators and all of the people on Twitter were complaining about the state of the pitch at Sky Stadium, which was bizarre as hell. And what happened? What are they whinging about?
I cannot work it out for the life of me. I've been going on about this to random people at work who have zero context about this for like 5 days now, because it really grinds my gears. They did it about Eden Park as well, which was a pitch that I could physically see. And if I know Sky Stadium and I know Eden Park, they were both carpets.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Is it because they get so used to their like dry or their artificial turf? Like, what? Is it because they just like blaming things? I can't work it out for the life of me. I've seen like 10 American journalists talking about they're going to have to improve these pitches for the World Cup. I'm like, what? Wait till you get to Australia.
That really bothers me, because how can they say that when, it's proven that Sky and Eden Park have been voted in the top 3 in Australasia? Like, because I keep up with that stuff. Like, Sky's number 2 in the whole of Australia and New Zealand. I don't know where they rank in the world, but at least in New Zealand and Australia, they're in the top 3. So I can't understand why these foreign journalists are complaining.
I reckon it's one of those things where one influential person, so maybe even the match commentator, complains and they don't know what they're talking about, and then everybody latches onto it because they want a reason. I mean, look, this happens like in all sporting and cultures and things like that. Like, one person latches on a reason for it, but it's bizarre because I actually watched the second match in a pub with Kate Taylor's parents, of all people, and they were saying that when they went to the matches that they played against some other countries, I can't remember what series it was, and they were in the US, their pitches were terrible, absolutely horrendous pitches. So I don't know what Denise thinks about this, sort of to put you in there, about maybe the mentality of media or where you think it might be coming from.
I actually don't know the criticism. Was it like not watered?
So Alex Morgan, so the first thing I saw was like Meg Linehan, who I massively respect, and then like a few other journos saying that the pitch was like poor quality about Wellington. And then Alex Morgan said in the presser that, like, we knew the pitch was dry, which is I don't know what that means, because one, it was watered right before kickoff, and two, yeah, it's grass. But and then in Auckland, another journo complained that our pitch, like, the tweet was something like, New Zealand's going to have to sort out the quality of these pitches before the World Cup. And I was like, what? Yeah. Did HBO Max, like, delay the pass wait? Because they were zipping it around. Everything looked fine to me. From my perspective, having, like, been inculcated in that, like, US WOSO fan world, that I think it does reflect, and it's a bit of an awakening for New Zealanders that might not know what it's like, that sort of fixative, critical lens that is foreign to our women's sport culture. But, you know, you saw a lot of comments being like, the football phones are useless, like, all they know how to do is foul the Americans, etc. Like, there was a lot of negativity that I think for New Zealand fans was a bit of a like, oh, this is different.
See, my feed is just full of beautiful thoughts and beautiful tweets. Joking. Yeah, we're a bunch of a-holes sometimes, and we'll just complain and feel pity on teams, and just kind of it's you get a lot of ignorant people. Now, I've been to America, I've looked at the pitch, I've looked at the pitch at Sky Stadium, I looked at the pitch in Eden Park. They were both watered before the match. I even asked a famous journalist, Meg Linehan. I was like, what are they talking about? She's like, I don't know. So if she doesn't know, people don't know. Like, I don't know.
Those pictures that Kate Taylor's parents will be talking about are probably the games that we played in SoCal, where we played the Philippines and I think it was Mexico. So
I think so, yeah.
And that was like late summer in California.
Yeah, a couple of ACLs gone on those pitches.
Yeah,
like,
I believe it. I mean, it is, some of these places that they put women's football, they're terrible, or absolutely.
Yeah, Megan Rapinoe, like, did her ACL training on a terrible pitch in Hawaii.
Exactly.
She did her ACL playing Mexico on those pitches that we're talking about just now.
Yeah.
You know, whereas we got through 2 games major injury free.
Yes.
Which for me was partly what I was scared about, right?
Coming back to the players, Denise, you and I were like, we were standing next to each other, and I was watching the American team, and I was like, I don't know who Rose Lavelle was, but she was freaking amazing. But there was that African, the black woman who was in the defensive line, and you said she was the defensive player of the year last year. I was like, holy cow, she was phenomenal.
I'm such an Amy Gurma stan. Oh,
wait, there's Naomi Gurma and Crystal Dunn.
Yeah, that one.
The former. Oh.
Okay, let's just talk about Gurma. Gurma's great. Helena, take it away. I mean,
okay, well, the first thing I want to say about Naomi Gurma is if somehow we, like, tag you on Twitter or something and you watch this, like, such a stan. She was, like, at the beach outside my parents' house on Sunday, but I was reading. And if I had just gone on Instagram earlier, I would have seen and, you know, could have just ambled down there. But anyway, that's beside the point. She is a player that I have followed since she kind of first popped up at Stanford, because I used to follow the Stanford team quite closely, because they're a sort of just like hive of world-class to-be players. And Gurma came in as a freshman, starting centre back straight away, basically ran the show the entire time, and is just one of the most amazingly silky players. And she, like, I spoke a bit this week, like, on Twitter and things, about the technical deficit that New Zealand has, which partly reflects the way that we train juniors. And I don't think America's much better on that point, but Gurma is a great example. Like, if you want to see what I mean by technical deficit, watch the way she plays versus the way some of our girls play. Like, I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but, like, the player that comes to mind is Paige Satchel. You can see when she's maneuvering a ball around that, like, she's maneuvering a ball around. For Gurma, every touch is facilitating the next pass. Every header is down and away. Like, technically, she just doesn't make mistakes. And that means that what she's able to see on the field and the way she's able to respond to situations is just so much more advanced, which is partly why she looks so calm and is always in the right space, because the ball's going to do what she needs it to do. And I think, you know, she's amazing young woman off the pitch, but she's kind of, you know, one of these technical benchmarks that like we should be looking to produce young players like that.
Yeah.
And we should draw a pretty firm, like I'm getting to the view where it's like now these days the view should be at NZ Football. Like if you're not passing technical testing, come back when you are, you know?
Yeah. I thought that was a very, very good analysis. And I think they do drill them well in the US. I mean, this is anecdotal, but there's an American woman on my football team, and she's just a gifted athlete anyway, but she only played as a kid. But she just, every touch is so good. And again, that's an anecdote. That's one person, but that's the sense that I get, is that that's really well drilled, and maybe we're missing that.
So I don't, so that we don't make this too long and we can move on to Auckland, I just want to do some quick fires about, you know, all the scoring and stuff in Wellington. So Alex Morgan had a very good game. I enjoyed her game as well. There was some Paige Thatchell had a good game when she came on for New Zealand. Betsy played well, better than she usually plays for the other team.
I'm just going to chip in there, Blake. There's a reason that Betsy played well, and I was watching this, and that's because Grace Jarley was outside her, and Grace was directing Betsy on where she wanted her and what her position was.
Yeah.
Grace was giving out the orders, and that really worked for Betsy.
That
and the 4-4-2.
Yeah, that combination could be good for the World Cup.
I mean, I honestly kept getting like literally blown away with like Grace Jolly and sometimes Crystal Dunn mixing it up. I was like, this is like a dream come true for me. I'm like, sometimes I would just kind of step back and I'll go, this is cool. Like, I didn't know this would ever happen in my life, you know, like,
my favorite was Ava Collins, who like I played against when she was in the NFL. Ava Collins, who's like crunching Lindsay Horan. I was like, oh, every time she's nailed me is better now. She just absolutely poleaxed Lindsay Horan, and I you know that
you're 1 degree of separation from being crunched with Horan. Yeah.
I just think that's, you know, the surreality of it all, you know, like.
Yeah. Any other moments like that in the match, Elena?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, like the whole thing. So, like, I remember being 10 and watching like a documentary on the US soccer program, like, you know, the 99ers. And like that was really the moment for me where I went from playing soccer to like loving soccer. And to like, you know, like you say, I just never thought I'd see it. And even though I'm young and that sounds kind of ridiculous, like this is where women's sport was at 5 years ago even. Like when I first started writing about it, no one cared. Like you would pitch stuff to publications and they'd be like, okay, whatever. You know, no one cared. So to have the US women's national team, who really are like the gods of women's football to me, there. Like I was sitting there on Saturday being like, oh my God, like that's Mallory Swanson, like these are these people. It's just so surreal. And like I think that's a part of it that, you know, non-football people, we want them to get swept up, and I think some came along and did get swept up, but for us football people, like who've been in the trenches or whatever, it was like, this is kind of makes me feel a bit worth it, you know.
Holly, do you want to talk about the fan club that we had behind us in Wellington?
Oh, right. So there was some people who clearly they weren't following the Ferns or the Knicks. There were this whole pack of young girls sitting behind us. And every time Paige came on, every time Paige was going for the ball or had the ball, they were yelling, go number 13, go number 13. I turned around, like, her name's Paige. And then they're like, go Paige, go Paige. And then didn't you see them later, Jonathan?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because they were so excited and they wanted to get her signature, and I'm like, wait there a second. So I went right down the other end of where the signatures were. I was like, Paige, I need to borrow you for a minute. And then we walked past the whole lineup of fans who were waiting to get signatures. I was like, these children here would love to get your signature, because they were cheering for you the whole game. She was so gracious. It was so cool. They won over. They'll be Paige Satchel fans for life.
Man.
What's up?
I think we should talk about a few more things on the pitch. I was really happy with the return of Lynn Williams. That personally made me so happy, and she scored a lovely header. I was just really happy to see that, because she's one of these athletes who has paid their dues, and who has been cut from teams before, and then re-added to teams at the last minute. Like she is, she's a Black woman in America. And, there was a time when Black soccer women did not have, hold of the U.S. national team. They didn't have a grip on it, and didn't have a ladder to come up. And she has missed out a bunch of times. And I'm hoping she's going to make this team. Before her injury, before her hamstring was ripped from her leg, from her bone, she was definitely on track to make the team, the bigger roster. Now, I wouldn't say she's on the bubble, but there are some, whizzes. They, at the time, you didn't have Trinity Rodman, and Swanson wasn't in form. So, cheers for Lynn for getting out there.
For me, she was the underrated player of this series. Really like watching her. I think she wasn't the best player on the team, but she didn't get as much credit as I wanted her to get. She was quality.
Yeah.
She hasn't lost pace either. Which, have your hamstring surgically reattached and not lose any pace. Like any sprinter who's ever done a hamstring, even just straining it, takes a long time to get the pace back. So it's a testament to how hard she's worked. So that kind of comeback from injury is so impressive.
I didn't know that before, so knowing that now, that makes it even more incredible. For someone to have their, and trust me, I know from all my operations growing up with my disability and what have you, for someone to have a hamstring injury and to come back like that, that's really something to be commended for, really. So yeah, I really like the look of her play in this series. So can we
quickly jumping in before we move to Auckland? Quickly jumping in.
Sorry.
Two players that I enjoyed on the park. One was, is it Korniak?
Yeah,
Korniak.
She is so tall and she is so mobile. She was incredible for the US. But my number one player that I thought for the Ferns that I loved watching in Wellington was Liv Chance. She was working her backside off. She was into everything. Liv was really leading by example.
Helena, do you have any other, any other comments on Wellington?
As an Aucklander, I reckon we've talked enough about Wellington. It's time to talk about Auckland.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go. Let's go to Auckland.
Okay, your turn, Denise, because you were Matt Day reporter for this one.
Yeah, tell us
So
about your lanyard experience.
So you can take this one.
Yeah, I had a prop. My very first media experience. And so you have to understand, I went from Wellington as a complete drunken fan. Just there's one guy, I was in line buying some swag, and he's like, "I recognize you from the podcast." I'm like, "Hey, buddy!" So then I get picked up by Impetus, and a great organization out of England, and they're like, "Okay, you're a journalist." I'm like, you're in the headlights, and I debut on probably the biggest match I will ever see or the most important match emotionally to me I will ever see. And so I go into the press area hours early, and Jonathan's like, "I'm at the pub having fun." And I'm like, "It's like the morgue in here." I mean, it's a very serious thing to be a journalist. And I see Meg Linehan, who's really probably the biggest soccer journalist in the world. And I'm like, "Hi, Meg." And I'd seen her outside the stadium in Wellington, so we did have a little bit of rapport. I'm like, I'm gonna follow you around like a puppy dog, and she, that's not gonna happen. So being in the press box is serious. It's no joke. It's quiet. It's the energy is kind of masculine, to be honest. It has this kind of masculine seriousness. There are people who will smile and, and we can have little conversations here and there, but they're there to do a job. And, the job is to think about all this independently, so there is no group think around it. And so, I could chit chat around a little bit, but it was very intense. Like when, anyone scores, you can't cheer, you can't do anything like that. It is, and I'm like, I'm trying to take notes, and I'm like, who was that? What time? Who's coming in for who? So that's all. And then you're trying to analyze the game independently, and it's different. It is a privilege, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I particularly enjoyed the presser after. I mean, I was in a room. If it is like, go sit in the front and get some photos. And so I'm like in the front row and like Rose Lavelle walks in and she's like 3 feet away from me. And I'm like, I'm like, not a fangirl, I'm a journalist and, but fangirl. And, Vlatko sits down next to her and they're like, okay, questions. And I'm like, like no one raises their hand there, but I was like, Rose, how did it feel to be captain today? And she answered that question. And it was cool. And off I was to becoming a journalist. And Rose is just as delightful in person as she is on the pitch. She truly, she has a childlike sweetness about her. She thanked Vlatko in kind of her own way. And she just, that creative touch she has on the pitch, she has in her life. And so that was really neat to see, very up close and personal. I asked a few questions, and then it was time for Yitka, and that was also really a different vibe. And it was really, Yitka really emphasized the experience and the connecting with the fans. And that was something, some of the very male journalists were not into hearing. They were like, what is, like, how are we going to fix this? Like, we got to fix this. And how are you going to do it? And are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And how are you going to do it? And, that it was a different vibe. So, which did I have more fun with? Wellington, for sure. 100%. Way more fun. Oh my God. It's like night and day. Which mattered to my life, which will I remember in 10 years is, that first feeling that you're in the presser. So that's my little roll on with it. And, I hope I can just jump back between fan and then journalist. And I think I can. I think I just literally have to take off the one hat, put the other hat, but I can't like slide both hats at the same time is kind of the way they operate.
Hopefully that's just a taste of what to come for some of us. So hopefully I get to do some, you get to do some, maybe even Jonathan get to do some, who knows? Like, we'll get to see what the future brings. I have 2 questions about what your experience. So, was there a difference between the US presser style and Yetka's presser style, or was it mostly the same? Because I would just imagine the US style being very PR engine, whereas the New Zealand style would be much more laid back.
It was actually the opposite. The US was quick. They want you in, they want you out, they want to move, they want to go, they wanted as few questions as possible. They just, and I even asked Meg Linehan, I'm like, is this it? I'm like, this was short. And she's like, well, with Rose, it's really short. And Yitka just wanted to talk. She wanted to, in fact, she hung around after. She just wanted to like connect with the media to make sure at least they understood where she was coming from. And she's a remarkable woman at a press conference. She rocks a room. I mean, you get it. She emphasizes her points again and again in different ways. She's good. She's very good.
So what style did you prefer, the US style or the New Zealand style?
I'm gonna switch that. Let's talk about football. Which style did you all prefer in the pitch?
Jonathan, do you think?
The impressive thing about the US, the thing that struck me the most was that they were on every pass and every play. It's almost like they had like a crystal ball and they knew what was coming. They were half a step ahead on every single play. We were playing catch up the whole time. The US are just at a whole nother level. And in that 4-3-3 formation, they had room to run, speed. I could just wax lyrical about how good they were. I better stop.
By the way, this may not be the correct number, but the crowd attendance for that was around 12,700.
And
so they beat the record again.
And 21. 12,721. Which, now that you've raised that, would like to make a point, because I saw some Wellingtonians whinging on Twitter about how it's not fair because Auckland's big city, blah, blah, blah. It was on a weekend. And yeah, point taken, it was on a weekend. That was an advantage. But it was on a weekend where there was a massive concert on, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which took out like 20 people that I personally know who would have been at the game. So it was a decent shove from Auckland as well, because I think what people forget about Auckland is it's like I live an hour and a half's drive from people I go to university with. It's a very big city. Transport's hard, especially at Eden Park. So I think I feel that's a pretty good effort from Aucklanders, especially because I feel like a lot of people didn't really know what was going on until about like Thursday or Friday. Started talking about it in the office, kind of forcing people to get tickets and take their daughters and things. And then I've had some cool conversations the last 2 days at work of people being like, man, I'm going to get World Cup tickets. Like, that was a really cool vibe. And I think that's the thing. Meg Linehan tweeted, "This crowd is lit." And it really was. Like, Jonathan, you kind of talk about how the US soccer style is like they're one step ahead. But then every time the Ferns even got like a toe to the ball, the crowd was going off.
Yeah.
And I think
And there's something in that, because like there's a big difference between Sky Stadium in Wellington and Eden Park. And Holly and I were talking about this last week around Allianz and how they've changed it. And now at Eden Park, it used to just be wide open. Now we're in the north stand. It's almost like there's a concrete ceiling above the fans on that side. And they've opened it up at the back. So you can stand at the back and see all the way down to the field. Like you can stand anywhere at the back. But the echo, the cheering, bounces off like this concrete roof and comes down, and it sounds like there's 40,000 people there, not 12,700. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was seriously cool. I mean, like the football, to be honest, like it's been interesting for me reading comments and reading, like you said, Denise, like that kind of angle of like how are we going to fix this. I think I read something and stuff like we've learned nothing or something, which I just like don't. Like, I'm going to speak quite strongly now. Like, I just think that that's wrong. Because what I saw, looking at it from my perspective, was that the Ferns came into that Auckland game playing a different style of press than they played in Wellington. So that's something that they worked on the training pitch. And for people that haven't played football, a press is not something that you just, like, wake up and decide to do. Presses are learned. They have different shapes. They have different triggers. Like, they're complicated things. The Ferns were running a different one against the US on Saturday, and it was a press that yielded the ball in the final third multiple times, which is something that not many teams' defensive setups will do to the US. The US is a team that plays through a press quite easily because they're able to play long and get in behind you because they've got such pace up front, and they've got players like Germer and players like Lavelle who have an incredible passing range. So they're not a team that's easy to press into giving up possession, and the Ferns did that multiple times. And so, like, did we get a shot on target? No, but I think partly that's because people weren't pulling the trigger when they could have. which is something that's very fixable. But did we create nothing? Was there no opportunity for Ferns in that game? Absolutely not. Like, this is what I mean about statistics telling you almost nothing in football. Like, if you just look at the stats, it would look like the Ferns weren't even on the field. But they were, and they were yielding good possession, and they were getting corners, and they were competing. So for me, I look at that, and I'm like, if you're doing it against the US, then I am super optimistic for what you can do against Norway, a team that isn't going to play it long and behind you, a team that wants to pass through your defensive block and is going to struggle to do that if you defend as they defended against the States. Like, that's where I'm at with this game. I think football-wise is really intriguing, and it showed me that Yitka is a really clever tactical coach, and the first win at a World Cup is there for the Ferns, if everything falls into place.
I think the second game looked a lot better. And I think a lot of it was that we were actually pushing up the field and pressing. We were brave enough to do that because we sat back, really far back. In fact, I was telling one of Denise's friends who doesn't know about football what parking the bus is, because it's kind of what I felt like we did. Whereas that second match here, we were pressing, and we were pressing as a team. It wasn't one headless chicken striker up there chasing the ball down, because, like you said, Helena, that doesn't work. It's more complicated than that, and you have to do it as a team, and you have to be really tactical about it. So I was actually very heartened by the Auckland performance, just because of that aggression.
Yeah, and belief, I think, it's a word that the Ferns probably like. There's a lot of narrative about Kiwis and we can do anything, but it doesn't always come through in our football. Whereas I think you saw a team that was a lot more willing to maybe get hit, maybe get scored on, but trying to learn this press, trying to see how it operated. And they were doing it well. Like, as someone who coaches, when I'm watching that game, and I was also with like non-football people. So they were like, what is going on? Like, why is that player not running to mark someone? It's like, because that's the press, right? You saw Ava Collins a lot of times perfect the sitting 50-50 between the midfielder and the fullback, shutting down two passing lanes. She was doing that incredibly well. That's a really well-drilled defensive side, because that's the kind of stuff that kills a press.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem that major, right? Like, I'm a winger. I always kind of think, if I don't take that step to the right, like, it's going to be okay. No, you've destroyed the press. You've given them the out ball.
Yeah.
So that kind of fine detail stuff that has never been there for the Ferns, I'm starting to see now.
So
but then you've got
me,
a funny squad. So that's the thing. You've not got most of your people. So this is part of the difficulty of training it. Sorry, Blake.
So for me, I thought Auckland was the better of the two performances. So we had a few changes by the US in this game. The most standout one was, is it Ashurst? Is that how you pronounce that name? Yeah. She came in for Alice Morgan. She had a really good game. So,
I'm sorry, what are we talking about?
Ash Hatch.
Oh, okay. Ashley Hatch.
And sorry if I butcher any of these names.
Oh, I've just never heard her called Ash.
So she had a really good game. She came in for Alice Morgan. I was quite impressed with her. So watching her, did you have any opinion on her, Jonathan? I really liked her. Thought she was quite a good player.
Nah, to be honest, I wasn't keeping so much of an eye on the US team in that Auckland match. I was too busy watching Paige and Ava absolutely laying it down and just going full guns. Paige was everywhere and Ava was just incredible to watch. It was like, yeah. So I can't comment on how the US played. I was too busy watching our girls.
I thought Ash Hatch gave you what she gives you. Like, this is kind of what Denise and I a little bit shadowed, and she didn't really surprise me. Like, I think she is, she's obviously a talented player. She's in the US Women's National Team, and she's a BYU product. I think, that's a good program. But, she's tall, she's got good positioning, she was in the right place. It was a nice finish, that first goal. Like, those finishes aren't as easy as they look. That little redirect into a corner, that's a good finish. But I didn't think, She's certainly not an Alex Morgan from my perspective, but she did like a good job leading the line. But she has the benefit of like people in the form of their lives either side. So
yeah, I don't think she's going to make the World Cup squad. I think she is good at getting her head on the ball at the right moment. Is she as good at just like flying by people and making the perfect pass and whatever? I mean, she's good. She's like really good, but I don't think she's going to make the squad.
But when you remember who's not here, right? Like Soph Smith, Megan Rapinoe, these are people that didn't even get on the plane.
Yep.
So
Macario, is coming back too, and sometimes she can play up top like that. But listen, she will make people think. She did her job, and she did it well, and she scored. And when you look at who scored, Ashley Hatch scored, and she scored the first one, and that is something to remember. So right on, Blake, for picking that up. What else do we got?
I want to
What about the you go, Helena,
I
sorry.
wanted to say that I thought that some young players for the Ferns really stepped up. So Gabby Rennie, I think, is starting to play like a leader.
Yeah.
I've been really impressed by her. I thought that she's clearly been working really hard technically and tactically. So I've been impressed by her. I just love Ava Collins' I'm just going to crush some people mentality. She's great value. And then I thought it was really cool to see Grace Wisniewski in this series get some time, because I really rate her as a player. I think she's excellent. I think she's a great workhorse, body on the line mentality. And after everything she's been through with football in the last year, it's cool to see someone come back and have their debut in that kind of storybook way, like against the world champions, and then get to come up at Auckland. Her family's from Hamilton, so bit of a closer destination to home. And I just think that she played well. She was assured. She made some good passes. She gave everything, which is what you're always going to get from Grace. I just think that that's a really cool story from my perspective.
You see a lot of the narrative of players coming back from physical injury, and it's amazing. But we hear that story a lot. To come back from like a serious mental health issue that prevents you enjoying playing football or training. It is an incredible story. And also she's worked so hard for the Phoenix as well. So we're extra stoked to see her make her debut.
Yeah, it's just something that, is not super talked about, in sport. Growing up playing reps or whatever, it definitely wasn't something that, if you were struggling mentally, it wasn't something that you'd ever bring up. So I think people might be underestimating the extent to which society is slightly ahead of sport, though society's not where it needs to be, but society is ahead of sport on talking about mental health. Sport's really behind. So Grace has been extremely brave in talking about what she's talked about. And I think it just, like you say, the same way we talk about Lynn Williams coming back from her hamstring, that to me is a story for Grace as well, just to come back and be her same self, be a better player even.
Speaking of Graces, there was another Grace that played in the first game for the Ferns, and that was Grace Neville. What did you guys think of her? I was impressed.
I like her. I think she's got a high ceiling.
Yeah. She's good. Right there. Yeah. Out of all the National League players that played in that series, any surprise packages that might make the World Cup squad for any of you?
I think we didn't see enough of them on the field to really test. But I think the Argentina squad will be more telling in terms of what Yitka made of this camp, because this camp was let's put 11 people on the field. We had Ellie Riley at centre back, which American fans found hysterically funny. So. I sort of ended up on Ellie Riley TikTok for a day or something, and all these people were like, why am I even watching this if Ellie Riley's in centre back? It's ridiculous. And I was like, okay, well, here we go then. Here we go. So I think Argentina, you'll see who Yitka was impressed by in this camp, because if Devin Jackson turned up and did what I know Devin Jackson can do.
She got a few minutes, didn't she?
Yeah, she got a 10, 15.
Not a lot of time.
Yeah. I remember thinking that it was a decent amount of time, which is nice.
Yeah. I feel like it always seems to me, as a casual observer, that a lot of times a promising player, they get picked for the squad, but they don't play, or they don't play a lot. So they go in the camp and they sort of, I guess, acclimatise, or the coach gets to know them, and then they wind up playing maybe at the next series or something like that. So I think this series was a bit different because we were so short on players. So there were a lot of people who seemed to be in the squad for the first time and then debuting as well. But I guess that's part of it, is that, like, even if they didn't play, Yitka gets to see how they fit in, how they train, what their mentality is like.
Mm.
And that's a really good point you make there, Holly, because, you know, there's an E grade, and I say E, and that's overstating it, grade sports commentator in New Zealand on a radio station that no one listens to and no one cares about this person's opinion. And this person said, the football ferns got a hiding. They need to cut the dead wood from their team. They keep picking too many players by name. It's like, you obviously did not watch the match. You had zero idea who was on the field. And the fact that Yitka is bringing these younger players through and taking a chance on them and so on just shows the level of absurdity that this person had in making comments about the series.
I know who you mean.
He who shall not be named.
Women's sport. It is all women's sport that this person makes uninformed comments on. There is a commentariat, which I think you said, Helena, this sort of unfortunate, really male commentariat who don't actually follow the team. Like, that really bothers me. I think I've mentioned before in our podcast talking about next games, people who make comments, and if they actually watch the women's games regularly, they would know the answer to that question and they wouldn't be making these statements. But
it's something I've been thinking about, especially this, the last week and a half, with like the buzz around the US kind of running. To me, it was like two oceans meeting. Like, you had the buzz from people who knew what they're on about like, this is the start of the party, right? Like, this is getting people on board the bus. And then the people who were like, this tour is throwing the ferns under the bus. What are they going to learn? They're going to get smashed. No one's there. Like, there were these two things meeting in the middle. And like, to me, and then you see people being like, why are they smiling? Why are they having fun at training? Why is Ellie Riley pretending to be a DJ? This is ridiculous. Women can't have joy. And it's like, no, I hope the ferns shut that out and don't listen to it, because women's sport is not, will not, has never been like men's sport in terms of the like crazy, aggressive, violent seriousness of it. These are athletes who work hard, who deserve to be paid for their labor, who are world class, who deserve the same stage and the same investment as everyone else. But they're also athletes who are people who haven't been able to gamble on sport, who have incredible lives off the pitch, who are fun and cool and musicians and dancers. And I don't want to lose that side of it. So, like, he who shall not be named can expect that the ferns will be in tears all they like. But I just think, no, that the Women's World Cup in its purest form is not a celebration of women becoming like men. It is a celebration of women's football. And women's football is not like men's football.
Yeah, it's better.
Celebrate that,
Yeah, the thing about the women's game is that these people are approachable. I talked to Allie Riley as a fan at the, and these people are making money off of some side hustles. Not that that's good, but that you because of that, you've seen them in different lights. You've seen Allie Riley with her parents on TikTok, like, that it's okay to be like a normal human being and sit in a normal house and not have, expect your house to look like this, or expect your life to look like this, your girlfriend or your husband to look like this. These are just regular people who are doing extraordinary things, and we have a privilege to have some glimpses into their life. Speaking of which, let's how did Ashley Ward do?
I was so impressed by her. I was actually about to bring her up. There are quite a few moments, like, again, I always come back to this because, like, one of the central nightmares of my playing career was trying to be turned into a fullback, because I hated the decision making that it required, and I thought that Ashley Ward really nailed that against the States. Like, several times she made the call to step up and try and win, and several times made that key interception. and the wing is where the US will kill you. So those were like extremely important moments for her to make those kind of quite brave decisions. So I was really impressed. I thought her engine was great. She dealt with, that's the hardest job that a fullback's probably ever going to have in women's football. So I was really impressed. It's cool to see someone kind of come a slightly different way to the Ferns as well.
Yeah, when I watched her from the press box and it was completely silent, I was like, wow, she has presence. She can do her job, and she felt like she was really doing it correctly. And I think she's going to give Yitka something to think about for sure. Blake?
So I was going to say, I'm going to use Jonathan's line so we don't go on too long. So as we bring the plane into land, so what are we? So the players of the series for me were Swanson and Rodman. I quite like them. They stood out for me. Now, just while I remember, the two score lines were 5-0 and 4-0. 4-0 for Wellington, 5 for Auckland.
Before we go, how about we each go around and pick 2 athletes on each team, or at least 2 athletes on one team, whichever team you want, or both, that, really made a big impression on you.
I was focusing on the US, to be honest, because I was learning about them. This was my chance to learn about them. But the only players that I took notice of were our players, the Phoenix players.
Cool.
For the New Zealand, I know you can all laugh, it's fine. But I took this opportunity to concentrate on US players because they don't come here often. Anyway, but who would I pick for New Zealand? Barry was good. I always forget her name, but the goalkeeper was good.
Erin Naylor?
Yeah, Naylor.
She was good.
So
Yeah.
I'll go Barry and Naylor because I don't watch much of the Kiwi squad. I try to concentrate on the US squad to prepare for the World Cup. So yeah, they're my players. Who else has got some?
Jonathan, you want to go?
Oh, 2 Ferns for me were Grace Neville and Gabby Rennie. Gabby was she's cool. She was very cool. Oh, and another one who didn't actually play, but who was really, 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 really cool is Murphy Schaaf. She's awesome. She's so cool. I really hope that she gets to have a run sometime and goal.
Yeah, she's up and coming.
Any US players for you, Jonathan, or were you concentrating on that?
Oh, just all of them. Honestly, they're just phenomenal. It was just take your breath away watching them. Just the precision, and it was just amazing.
Denise?
I'm going to go with the U.S. players since I'm the U.S. person here. I mean, Rose Lavelle for me was the MVP of probably both. She was just so good. She was in great form, which is exciting for the U.S. team because she's a bit fragile sometimes, and you don't want to see her injured. But when she is on, she is one of the best players in the world. And yeah. I'm just going to pick an obvious person. I'm not like a big Mallory Swanson fan because off the pitch, she doesn't do it for me. She didn't know what a kiwi was, like a kiwi was a bird, like things like that. I'm not a fan, but she was really fast, really great form. And you couldn't really say anything bad about her about the match. And she was someone I was watching, like, is she going to make the wrong pass? Is she not going to look around? Is she going to? And I was like, she played really good. I had nothing bad to say.
She was, yeah. As I said, I really enjoyed watching it. She was deadly for me.
And I will say Trinity Rodman surprised me. And what she surprised me with was her passing. And
Pass first.
well, yeah, her texture on these passes were incredible. And I was like, you're young. You shouldn't be able to do this yet. And she did it incredibly. And I was also give something Vlatko something to think about with Trinity Rodman. She was not on my roster list for who's going to make the World Cup. And I am thinking twice about that because, you know, she was able to hit some curlers in that were just, wow. She looked like Megan Rapinoe the way she was hitting some of these balls. And I was like, wow, if you can do that, I'm going to become your fan.
I miss it. I can't remember whether I put it in our chat or just me and Jonathan, but I messaged Jonathan and I said she could be a better footballer than her dad was a basketball player.
Oh, yeah, let's do it. Holly, who do you got?
I mean, for the US team, yeah, kind of all of them in a way. Rose Lavelle for sure. Incredible. Just they're incredible. The machines. For us, I think energy-wise, when you've got Paige Satchel in the field, you feel like something's happening. As you know, we discussed already that maybe like her technique isn't perfect or something, although that's a general criticism of football in New Zealand, but she's always trying. You always feel like someone is trying really hard and you never know where they're going to turn up the ball. And I think Grace Jallet as well. I think she did really, really well. I think she really stepped up. Mm-hmm. It might help that she's relatively big, and a lot of the American team, that was something else that one of your friends, Denise, was saying, Amanda was saying, you know, look, they seem so big. How are they all so big? And they do have the size. So I think Jallet having a bit of that size also and physicality probably helps. But yeah, I liked those two players, and I'm not at all biased that they're next players or ex-next players. I think they did really well, and I feel like when they got the ball, I was excited.
Okay, just one more thing. So we won't go into the proceeding.
Hang on, Blake. You've missed someone. You've got your special guest that we need to ask.
Oh, sorry, Helena. Sorry.
Blake, I'll just take it personally and move on. For me, so for the Ferns, I'm going to be slightly unusual and say Ellie Riley and Erin Naylor. The latter, because I feel like I need to like I said in the preview thing that I haven't really been that impressed by Erin Naylor for a long time, and I haven't been, and boy did she come out and make me look like an idiot for saying that. So full respect to her. She made some unbelievable saves, so that was awesome. Kept the score lines down, which was important because otherwise the white men would have lost their minds. And then Ellie Riley, like as someone who, like off the pitch, I've always been like a little bit, yeah, you know, like California born and raised, like I would like her to spend some time here, blah, blah, blah. But I thought that she just put her heart and soul into both performances, doing a job. Like if you're not a centre back, like one does not simply play centre back. Like you don't just stick someone in centre back. Like it's really hard. And she was getting people standing on her hand and like falling all over the pitch, making last-ditch tackles, making lung-busting runs back. You know, I just thought like that's a captain's performance. It's the first time I've really thought that about Ellie Riley, that's a captain. So that really impressed me. For the States, I just literally love Rose Lavelle so much. But I also thought Ashley Sanchito was really impressive. She's another player that I've kind of watched for a long time coming up through the age groups through UCLA. She played some awesome passes in that game. And her and Lavelle, like if the US can wrangle that midfield so that they've got those two in there, which, you know, might mean benching Haran or something, but those two really exciting together. So that's my summary. There you go, Blake.
Sorry.
Yeah. I have one claim to fame about Ashley Sanchez. She read my article.
Ah, wow. That's the dream.
So Blake, just before we finish, I just want to go on a completely different tangent for a minute, just for 1 minute. And I want to acknowledge the team at Sky Stadium in Wellington, because we reached out to them in regards to Blake and his accessibility with the wheelchair. And I got a phone call from Hamish from Sky Stadium on the Tuesday before the Wednesday game saying, hey, we understand Blake's coming. He's got a wheelchair. He's got some access things. How about you take this approach, bring him in through this entry and go through that exit? And it worked absolutely superb. So I just really want to just do a shout out to Hamish and the team at Sky Stadium, which was cool. And I also noticed at Eden Park that their accessibility seating in the north stand for people in wheelchairs is amazing. You get like it's up behind the seats, but it's equally like right there on the concourse. And if you're in a wheelchair, you can get an amazing view of that pitch. So shout out. So like if anyone is thinking, oh, I don't know whether I'm going to go, accessibility, both of those stadiums are brilliant. So shout out to both Eden Park and also Sky Stadium for that.
So just lastly, before we go, so 30 seconds from each of you. So, but don't talk about the preceding match because we'll get into that in another episode. Player welfare, because the majority of them had to, the Venus players especially had to back up the following morning. So 15 to 30 seconds from each of you. What are your opinions on that? I wasn't a fan of it. I didn't like it, even though it helped us a lot. I didn't like it.
I had little chats with Betsy Hassett on Instagram, and she I think she was a little bummed she wasn't playing, up in Auckland. Like that was kind of awkward for her. So with her, she played a match on Wednesday, and then she didn't play on Saturday, and she was on fire on Sunday. I mean, I don't know.
We'll get into that and then the next one, but
it's just what I would say is it's more complicated. Like it's more that goes into it. As someone who's played Super League futsal, which is where you fly in the morning and you play like 7 games of futsal over 3 days, there's more to load management than just time frames. So like minutes caps were adhered to. The flight time is 45 minutes. Like I'm not saying that I 100% endorse it. It did concern me, but equally, there are people in these systems that know what they're doing.
Jonathan? Sorry.
I'm with Helena on this. Like the players, they were being managed. There was a management plan for time and how much game they were going to get before that happened, and Yitka stuck to it, and it's fine. And Paige is only 24. She's super young. She's super fit. Playing 2 games back to back. Yeah. I did say to her on Sunday afternoon, I was like, you probably need a day off now because your legs might be a bit tired. She was like,
I agree that we do like it. It's something you have to be careful about. But I'm assuming that the Knicks and football, New Zealand football, were communicating with each other, and they have plenty of experts to make that decision. It did look like minutes were capped. I think it worked out results-wise, probably for both teams. You just hope that people are paying attention. But look, a lot of the people who backed up to play the next match didn't get any minutes at all in the Ferns squad. So like Bree Edwards played the match on Sunday, but didn't get a minute in the Ferns. So some of that is obviously there's the effect of travel time and being tired and being at a different camp. But so long as it's managed well, it's not ideal, but it's football.
Yeah, we might be saying something completely different if someone was injured, So we're going like this because all went well. But if someone had an ACL, Paige Satchel, we're down. We might be singing something else. So it's a great question, Blake. And I think it's one to keep kicking around.
It shouldn't be a problem usually. The problem has been that New Zealand football has decided to host the series. And, a lot of these clubs have decided to release their players. And it's not something that should normally be a problem. Load management's more of a problem when you're like playing multiple competitions or something like that for these teams that play in Europe. Ideally, it shouldn't be as much of a problem for, international versus domestic competitions.
Okay, so for this episode, we will leave it there. If you like us talking about the series and want us to talk about more in the lead up to the World Cup, like and subscribe this video, and we will see you on the next one.
Hey.